do not bid on her. The woman who terrified. Every buyer in Louisiana, do not bid on her. The words were not written with ink meant to last. They were slapped on the auction rostrum with a brush that shook, black paint bleeding down the pine boards like someone had tried to wash it off and failed. By noon, the humidity of New Orleans had softened the strokes, but the message stayed sharp because no one dared touch it. Men in linen coats pretended they hadn't read it. They stared at their shoes. They checked the faces of other men, the way gamblers check a table for marked cards. A few laughed too loudly. A few spat and muttered about nerves and women's tales. And then she stepped out from behind the curtain. Not dragged, not shoved, not stumbling the way the others sometimes did when they'd been held too long in the back rooms. She walked as if the floor belonged to her. Her wrists were bare. That was the first shock. No iron glinting in the sun, no chain rattling as she moved. Just a narrow scar where a cuff had once rubbed. Faded enough to prove it wasn't fresh. Still visible enough to prove it had been real. She was tall for a woman who'd lived on rationed food. Her dress was plain cotton, patched at the hem, but clean. Clean in a way that made the crowd uneasy, as if someone had scrubbed her before bringing her up. Not to show her off, but to erase something. Her hair was pinned back without ribbons. Her face was calm without softness. The auctioneer, a loud man named Baptiste Giraud, with a voice like a brass horn, cleared his throat and tried to smile. "Gentlemen," he began, slapping his catalog, "we have a special lot today. Skilled, quick with her hands, house-trained, can cook, can sew." She looked straight at him. The smile on Giraud's face died like a candle in wind. Behind him, his clerk, Jules St-Cyr, 19 years old, ink-stained fingers, eager to be noticed, held the ledger open and waited for the words he always wrote. Prime, sound, docile. Giraud swallowed. "Her name is—" The woman spoke first, soft enough that Jules almost thought he'd imagined it. "Tell them, my price is not money." The crowd tensed, as if a gun had been fired. An enslaved woman wasn't supposed to interrupt the sale. She wasn't supposed to bargain. She wasn't supposed to speak like that, like someone making an appointment. Giraud's eyes flashed with panic, then anger. He leaned toward her, lips thin. "Quiet," he hissed. Not loud enough for the crowd, but loud enough for Jules to hear. She didn't flinch. She lifted her chin and turned her gaze outward, sweeping the faces. Men who had shouted bids moments earlier now stared at the rostrum like it was an altar, and she was the only thing on it that could speak truth. She pointed, one finger not shaking. "You," she said, and her voice was still soft, still steady. "Monsieur, with the gold watch chain." A man near the front stiffened. He was heavyset, red-cheeked, with a ring large enough to hurt someone. "You lost your first wife in the fever year," she continued, "and you told your children God took her. But she begged you not to lock her in the back room, and you did. You were afraid of catching it, and you left her there." The man's face drained, then flooded red. "That's a lie," he barked, too fast. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She simply said, "Do you want me to say what you said to the priest when you paid him to bury her before dawn?" A sound moved through the crowd, like a ripple through a sheet. The man's mouth opened and closed. His hand went to his watch chain as if it could anchor him. She pointed again to a younger man with neat hair and a cane. "And you," she said, "you came here to buy courage, to buy a body that can't refuse you. But you already have a child by a woman you sold last winter, and you've been paying your cousin to keep her quiet in the country." The younger man jerked back as if struck. His cane nearly slipped. Giraud slammed his palm down. "Enough! Enough!" His voice cracked as he tried to regain control. "Gentlemen, do not be distracted by the—" He searched for a word that would sound like authority instead of fear. "By the theatrics," he finished. But the crowd wasn't looking at him. They were looking at her. A man in the second row, broad shoulders, sunburned neck, the kind of man who thought his size was a shield, forced a laugh. "Witch," he said. "A nuisance. I'll bid on her, just to prove—" She turned toward him and smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't cruel either. It was the smile of someone who had already read the last page. "You don't have enough," she said. The man scoffed. "Enough money?" She tilted her head. "Enough prayers." The laugh that had started in his throat died there. Silence stretched long enough that Jules heard the creak of the rostrum boards under Giraud's boots. He heard a fly buzz close to his ear. He heard his own heartbeat, heavy and stupid. Then, from somewhere on the edge of the crowd, a whisper, just loud enough to be contagious. "Don't," someone said. "Don't bid on her." Another whisper answered. "It's her. It's the one." A third voice, older, rougher, the tone of a man who had seen too much and wanted to see less. "Last buyer went broke inside a month." The rumor tightened around the crowd like rope. Giraud's hand trembled as he turned a page in the catalog. He tried to pretend it was just heat. "Start at 600, he announced, as if volume could change reality. 600 for a skilled housewoman. Who gives— No one moved. Jules stared at the blank space in the ledger where bids should have been. His pen hovered. His lungs felt too small. Giraud tried again. 550, he barked. "A bargain!" Still nothing. The woman looked down at Jules for the first time. Her eyes were dark. Not hollow, not pleading, just measuring. Jules had spent his life measuring people too, measuring how much they might pay, how much they might steal, how easily they might be managed. Being measured back made his throat go dry. She leaned slightly toward him. Not enough for the crowd to see, but enough for him to hear. "You write names," she said. "Write this one." "What?" Jules whispered. Before he could stop himself, her lips barely moved. "Write, do not bid on her." Then she straightened and faced the crowd again, as if she had said nothing at all. And Jules St. Cyr, obedient clerk, ambitious boy, son of a man who had crawled out of the gutters into a decent suit, felt his hand move on its own. In the margin of the auction ledger, beside the empty lines where bids should have been, he wrote the words he had seen on the rostrum. "Do not bid on her." He didn't know then that those 5 words would become a warning whispered from New Orleans to the bayous, from the levee camps to the sugar parishes, from the back pews of churches to the card tables of men who thought they owned fate. He didn't know then that he had just signed his name to her story. He only knew that when Giraud called the sale off, angry, humiliated, sweating through his collar, and ordered the woman dragged back behind the curtain, she went without resistance. Not because she was defeated, because she had already gotten what she came for. That night, Jules tried to sleep. The city didn't believe in silence. Even after dark, New Orleans breathed noise, a distant fiddle, a shout from a tavern, the thin cry of a baby somewhere in the alleys, the river's constant murmur, as if it was telling secrets to itself. Jules lay in his narrow bed behind the auction house office, staring at the ceiling boards, replaying the scene until his stomach clenched. He told himself it had been performance. He told himself the men she named were simply unlucky. Everyone in this city had a secret, and if you guessed long enough, you'd hit someone's wound. But he couldn't forget the way the watch chain man's face had changed. The way his eyes had flickered, not with outrage, but recognition. Jules rolled onto his side, pressed his palm against his chest as if he could push his heartbeat down. In the next room, Giraud paced and cursed and drank. The auctioneer's boots thudded like a metronome of rage. At some point, Jules drifted into a thin, anxious sleep. He woke to the sound of scratching. Not rats, not the river wind. Scratching like a pen on paper. Jules sat up, heart slamming. The room was dark except for moonlight leaking through a cracked shutter. The scratching came again, deliberate, patient, from the office. Jules slid out of bed and crept toward the door. His hand shook as he touched the knob. He told himself it was Giraud, writing an angry letter to a supplier, or counting money to soothe his pride. But the office lamp was not lit. Jules eased the door open. Moonlight spilled into the office in thin bars. The ledger lay on the desk where he had left it. The inkwell sat beside it like a small black eye. And at the desk, in the moonlight, someone stood. Not Giraud. The woman from the rostrum. She had slipped in as quietly as smoke. Her dress was the same plain cotton. But now Jules noticed the way it hung, like a costume worn for the day and discarded at night. Her hair was looser, not messy, just freed from its pins. In her hand, she held Jules's pen. She was writing in the ledger. Jules's breath caught. How? She didn't look up. You didn't lock the office, she said calmly, as if explaining a simple fact. Because you believe doors are for other people. Jules swallowed. You're not supposed to be... Supposed, she repeated softly, and there was a faint amusement in it. That's a word men use when they forget other hearts beat in the world. She finished the line she was writing, set the pen down, and only then looked at him. Jules stepped back despite himself. How did you get out? He demanded, trying to summon anger as a shield. Out of what? She asked. The back rooms. The lock. The guards. She walked toward him, and Jules realized she wasn't walking like someone sneaking. She was walking like someone visiting. The guards are men, she said. Men always have a price. Sometimes it's coins. Sometimes it's fear. Jules' throat tightened. Are you threatening me? She stopped a few steps away, close enough that Jules could see her eyes clearly now. No, she said. I'm asking. Asking what? She held up a folded scrap of paper. Jules hadn't seen it before. It must have been tucked in her sleeve. Tomorrow, she said, you will deliver this. Jules stared at the paper as if it could bite. To who? She gave him an address. A street in the Faubourg Marigny, near the river. The kind of place Jules's father warned him about. Too many free people of color. Too many dockmen. Too many eyes. Jules shook his head. I can't. Giraud, Baptiste Giraud, she said, naming the auctioneer as if tasting the syllables. He sells flesh and tells himself it's commerce. He will not notice one clerk walking out with one paper. Jules forced a laugh that sounded wrong in his own ears. And if I don't? She looked at the ledger on the desk behind her. Then tomorrow, she said, when the men return to prove their courage, I will say your name from the rostrum. Jules froze. My name isn't in the catalog. It doesn't need to be. Her voice stayed soft. You have your own catalog, Jules St. Cyr. You wrote it with everything you have watched and said nothing about. Jules felt heat rush up his neck. I've said nothing because it's not my place. Place, she murmured, almost kindly, always that word. She stepped closer and Jules's skin prickled. You want a life, she continued. That is clean. But you work in a room built to make life dirty. And dirt clings. Jules's hands clenched. Who are you? She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, in the parish where I was born, they called me Mercy. Jules blinked. Mercy? Her smile returned, small, sharp. That was not my name. That was a joke. She tilted her head slightly. In the city, they call me something else. What? She leaned in just enough that he could smell soap on her skin, clean and strange in this place of sweat. They call me Do Not Bid, she whispered. Then she straightened again, stepping back as if she had never been close at all. Deliver the paper, she said, and in return, I won't speak your name. Jules wanted to refuse. He wanted to shout, to call for Giraud, to prove he was not afraid of one woman. But fear doesn't always feel like trembling. Sometimes it feels like being seen too clearly. Jules stared at her, then at the paper in her hand. He reached out and took it. Her fingers brushed his, brief, cool. "You'll regret this," Jules said, because it was the only thread he had. Her eyes didn't change. "No," she said, "you will." And then she moved past him, silent as the river at dawn. Jules stood in the doorway long after she was gone, the folded paper burning in his palm like a coal. In the morning, the auction house smelled like old sweat and fresh lies. Giraud sat at his desk, jaw tight, pretending to read a letter while he listened to the courtyard outside. Men arriving, men talking loudly about courage, men laughing too hard. He looked up as Jules entered. "You," he snapped. "You'll write the catalog again. We'll sell her today, whether they like it or not. I will not be humiliated by a... He didn't finish. He couldn't find a word that made her smaller than she had made him. Jules nodded, keeping his face blank. His hand slid the folded paper deeper into his pocket. Giraud leaned forward, eyes hard. "And if she speaks again," he said, "you will not write her nonsense. You will write what I tell you to write. Understand?" Jules swallowed. "Yes, Monsieur Giraud." Giraud exhaled like a man trying to calm his own storm. "Good. Good. Now, where is the ledger?" Jules's pulse stuttered. The ledger lay where it always lay, but Jules suddenly remembered she had written in it last night. He tried to move casually, to step toward the desk and block the view. But Giraud was already reaching. His thick fingers opened the ledger, flipped pages impatiently, eyes scanning. Jules's breath caught. Giraud stopped. His gaze fixed on something near the margin. The words Jules had written. "Do not bid on her." For a heartbeat, the auctioneer's face turned pale. Then rage flooded him. He slammed the ledger shut so hard the ink bottle rattled. "What is this?" Jules forced confusion. "What, sir?" Giraud's hand rose, and Jules braced for a strike. But Giraud's eyes darted toward the office door, toward the courtyard beyond, toward the men gathering. He lowered his hand slowly. His voice dropped to a hiss. "You wrote this?" Jules shook his head. "No, sir." Giraud stared at him as if weighing the lie. Then he whispered, "She's been in here." Jules kept his face still. "That's impossible." Giraud's jaw worked. He looked suddenly older than yesterday. "In this city," he muttered, "nothing is impossible. Only expensive." He grabbed the ledger again, flipped to the page, and tore it out with a violent jerk. Paper ripped. Jules flinched at the sound. Giraud crumpled the page and shoved it into his pocket as if hiding it from the air itself. "Go!" he snapped at Jules. "Prepare the rostrum, and keep your eyes open. If she's near..." He stopped, swallowing. "If she's near," he finished, "don't let her speak." Jules nodded and left the office with the folded paper heavy in his pocket and a new realization in his chest. Giraud was afraid too. Outside, the courtyard had filled again. Men with money, men with debts, men who saw human beings as solutions. They had come to prove the warning didn't apply to them. They had come to buy defiance and call it ownership. The rostrum boards had been scrubbed, but the black paint stain from yesterday still faintly showed, like a bruise that wouldn't fade. And the sign, "Do not bid on her," was gone. Not because the warning had been disproved, because Giraud believed that if a thing couldn't be seen, it couldn't be feared. The curtain behind the rostrum twitched. Jules's hands trembled as he arranged the catalog papers, as he laid the pen where he could grab it quickly, as he tried not to look at the faces in the crowd. He saw the watch chain man again, standing farther back now, pretending he wasn't watching. He saw the younger man with the cane, eyes fixed on the ground. He saw a new face, a man with a soldier's posture and a scar along his jaw, his coat cut finer than most. His eyes were calm in a way Jules didn't trust. That man smiled slightly as if this was entertainment. Giraud climbed onto the rostrum, forced his grin back into place, and raised his hands. "Gentlemen," he boomed, "we will proceed. And today, we will not be distracted by foolish stories." The curtain pulled back. She stepped out again. But today, she wasn't alone. 2 guards flanked her. Real guards this time. Hands on clubs, faces hard. Giraud had learned at least one lesson. Her wrists were still bare. The crowd murmured. Giraud spoke fast. "Lot number 12, housewoman. Good health." "No." She looked at the man with the soldier's posture. Jules watched her gaze settle, and he felt it like a hook in his own stomach, because he knew that look now. She had chosen someone. The man with the scar lifted his chin, meeting her eyes without flinching. He smiled wider. And then, to Jules's horror, the woman smiled back. Not the sharp smile from yesterday. Something almost pleased. She turned her head slightly, and her voice carried, still soft, but somehow reaching every ear. "Captain," she said. The scarred man's smile froze. A low shock went through the crowd. Names mattered here. Titles mattered. A woman being sold wasn't supposed to speak to a man like she knew him. Giraud snapped, "Quiet!" But she continued, calm as prayer. "Captain Silas Rook," she said, and the name hit the air like a thrown stone. "You came to buy me." The scarred man, Captain Rook, recovered quickly. He laughed, as if amused. "I bought many things," he called. "Why should you be special?" She looked at him as if considering whether to answer. Then she said, "Because you already tried to steal me once." The crowd inhaled. Rook's laugh faltered. "I don't know you." "You know my face," she replied. "You know it from the dockside holding pen 2 years ago when you dragged a free boy from the river because you said his papers looked too clean." Rook's jaw tightened. The crowd's attention sharpened. Men loved scandal almost as much as they loved ownership, because scandal made them feel safer. If someone else was being exposed, maybe they weren't. Rook's eyes narrowed. "Careful," he warned, voice low. She tilted her head. "Careful is what you should have been when you took money from Monsieur Vallon to return his property quietly after you'd already sold it to another man." Rook's face went still. A murmur rose like wind. Jules saw the watch chain man glance at his neighbor. He saw the cane man's eyes lift, curious despite fear. Giraud tried to cut in, voice too loud. "Gentlemen, ignore her. She's dangerous," someone whispered. "No," another voice whispered back. "She's accurate." Rook stepped forward, just one step, as if to remind everyone he was not the one being sold. "You're trying to frighten them," he said. "It won't work. I've dealt with frightful things." She looked at him steadily. "Then bid," she said simply. Rook's smile returned brittle. "Gladly." Giraud seized the moment like a drowning man grabbing rope. "Yes, yes, gentlemen. Bidding begins at—" But Rook didn't wait. 1,000, he called. The crowd erupted. 1,000 was reckless for a housewoman. It was meant to be a statement, not a purchase. Giraud's eyes widened with greedy relief. 1,000. Do I hear— The woman's gaze didn't leave Rook. "You want to own the rumor," she said, not to the crowd but to him. "You want to put your hand on it and say you're not afraid." Rook's grin sharpened. "That's right." She nodded as if approving. "Then buy it," she said. Rook lifted his chin. 1,200. Giraud nearly choked on his own excitement. 1,200. Any man to— Silence. No one wanted to compete with a captain who hunted people for a living. Giraud's hand trembled as he raised the gavel. "Sold to Captain Silas Rook." The gavel slammed. The crowd exhaled, some relieved, some disappointed. The moment felt like it had ended. But the woman— "Do not bid," didn't look defeated. She didn't look frightened. She looked satisfied. Jules's stomach turned, because he suddenly understood what she had done. Yesterday, she had stopped the sale by naming secrets. Today, she had forced a sale by choosing a man who had secrets worth killing to keep. And Jules, with the folded paper in his pocket, was no longer sure whether he was her hostage or her accomplice. That afternoon, Jules walked to the Marigny with the folded papers sweating in his palm. He didn't take the main streets. He moved through alleys that smelled of spilled beer and fish guts, past yards where laundry hung like flags, past doorways where men watched him without hiding it. The city felt different when he wasn't moving under Giraud's orders. It felt like it had opinions. At the address she'd given, he found a narrow house with peeling paint and a front step worn smooth. A woman sat on the step, shelling peas into a bowl, humming under her breath. She didn't look up as Jules approached. Jules hesitated. "Excuse me." The woman kept shelling. Jules swallowed. "I have something to deliver." The woman's hands didn't pause. "For who?" Jules glanced around. The street was quiet, but not empty. A man leaned against a post farther down, pretending to smoke. A boy rolled a hoop along the dirt, watching too closely. Eyes everywhere. Jules lowered his voice. "For Mercy." The humming stopped. The woman finally looked up. Her eyes were pale brown, sharp. "Mercy is a church word," she said. "We don't use it casually." Jules' mouth went dry. "She told me." The woman stared at him for a long moment, then nodded toward the door. "Inside," she said. Jules stepped into the dim room. It smelled of coffee and something medicinal. The front curtains were drawn despite the daylight. A man sat at a table repairing a boot. Another woman stood near the back, washing cloth in a basin, but her gaze tracked Jules like a rifle sight. The woman from the step closed the door behind him. "Put it on the table," she said. Jules placed the folded paper down, as if it might explode. His fingers hovered, reluctant to let go. The man with the boot glanced up. "You followed," he said, voice calm. "Good." "I didn't have a choice," Jules snapped, before he could stop himself. The man's mouth twitched. "None of us do." The woman from the step unfolded the paper carefully, like something sacred. She read it quickly, eyes moving fast. Jules leaned forward, trying to glimpse the words. It wasn't a letter. It was a list. Names. Not just names, descriptions, addresses, dates, notes in a tight hand, and at the bottom, a single line. Tonight, St. Claude Wharf. Midnight. Bring the lantern with the broken glass. Jules' skin prickled. "What is this?" The woman looked at him over the paper. "A door," she said. "If we can open it." The man with the boot set his work down. "Did she say anything else to you?" Jules hesitated. He saw the faces in the room, hard, hopeful, wary. He realized these were not people playing at secrets. These were people who lived on them. "She said," Jules began slowly, "that she wouldn't speak my name if I delivered it." The woman's mouth tightened. "She speaks names when it serves her," she murmured. Jules felt anger flare. "So she's using me." The man with the boot studied him. "And you're not used already?" he asked quietly. "You think because you hold the pen, you're not on the block?" Jules's throat closed. The woman folded the list again, tucked it into her explaining hands. "You should leave," she said to Jules. "Go back to your auction house. Pretend your conscience is just indigestion." Jules bristled. "I'm not—" "Not what?" The woman cut in sharp. "Not like them. Not like the men who bid. You write their words. You make the paper that makes the sale respectable." Jules's cheeks burned. The man with the boot sighed. "Let him breathe," he said. He stood and stepped closer to Jules. He was older than Jules had thought, with gray in his hair and a limp that suggested a past Jules didn't want to imagine. "Listen," he said softly. "She chose you because you can walk between rooms. You can enter places we cannot. That is not a compliment. It is a tool." Jules stared. "Who are you?" The man's gaze didn't waver. "Someone who remembers names," he replied. "And someone who knows the woman you call do not bid is not just frightening men for sport." Jules swallowed. "Then why does she do it?" The man's eyes flicked toward the folded list. "Because men who buy people are most afraid of being seen doing it," he said. "And she has learned how to become a mirror." Jules's skin went cold. What happens at the wharf? The woman from the step answered. Either we get a friend out of a cage, she said, or we watch someone else disappear. Jules's mouth went dry. A friend? The man with the boot looked at him carefully. You don't know, he said. Jules clenched his fists. Know what? The man's voice dropped lower. Captain Silas Rook doesn't just hunt runaways, he said. He hunts free people, too, when he can sell them. He calls it a mistake when he's caught. He calls it commerce when he isn't. Jules thought of Rook's smile, his easy bid, his confidence. What does she have to do with him? Jules asked. The woman from the step's eyes sharpened. She's going into his house, she said. And if she doesn't come out... She didn't finish. Jules realized the air in the room had shifted. This wasn't gossip. This was an operation. And somewhere in Jules's mind, a dangerous question rose. Had she forced Rook to buy her because she was trapped? Or because she had been trying to get inside his walls for years? Jules left the house with his mind vibrating. On the walk back, he caught himself checking shadows for followers. He caught himself flinching at every carriage wheel, every laugh, every sudden shout. By the time he reached the auction house, dusk had pulled the city into a purple haze. Lamps flickered to life along the streets, and the smell of river mud rose with the evening. Inside, Giraud was in a better mood. Money had a way of healing wounded pride. Rook paid in full, Giraud announced as Jules entered, waving a pouch with a satisfied grin. He thinks he's brave. He thinks he bought a story. He chuckled. Jules forced a smile that felt like wearing someone else's skin. Where is she now? Giraud waved a hand. Gone. Delivered to the captain's house. Let him deal with her mouth. Jules's pulse spiked. You're not... worried? Giraud snorted. Worried? About what? A woman. He leaned back in his chair, pleased with himself. Listen, boy. People are like horses. Some neigh too much. You put them in the right stable, they learn quiet. Jules felt nausea rise. He excused himself, went to the back room under the pretense of organizing inventory, and pressed his forehead against the cool wood of a shelf. Midnight. St. Claude Wharf. He didn't know what he was supposed to do with that knowledge. He didn't know what kind of person he was becoming by knowing it. And he didn't know what terrified him more, the thought of Captain Rook owning her. Or the thought that she had wanted him to. Captain Silas Rook lived in a house that looked like it didn't believe in storms. It stood slightly apart from its neighbors, with a small wrought iron balcony and shutters painted a confident green. Inside, the floors were polished so hard they reflected candlelight, like water. Rook enjoyed that reflection. It made him feel doubled. When she was brought to him, he didn't greet her like a man receiving property. He greeted her like a man receiving a challenge. So, he said, leaning against the mantel, swirling a glass he didn't offer her, you made quite a show. She stood in the center of the parlor, hands at her sides, eyes steady. The guard who had escorted her lingered near the door, nervous, as if the room itself could turn on him. Rook's gaze traveled over her, with the practiced ease of a man who thought looking was a right. You're proud, he continued. Proud things break. She didn't respond. Rook smiled. Silent now? Pity? I paid extra for your tongue. She lifted her eyes slightly, meeting his. What did you pay for last year? She asked. When you sold a boy you swore was a runaway, and his mother came to your office with papers and you laughed at her. Rook's smile tightened. Careful, he said again, but now the word had an edge. She tilted her head. Why? She asked, almost curious. Are you afraid of words? Rook stepped closer, closing the distance with the confidence of someone used to others stepping back. You think you can ruin a men, he said softly. You think you can scare them with whispers. He leaned closer. But I have buried whispers under dirt, he murmured. I have made people vanish so completely their own dogs forgot their smell. A chill moved through the room. The guard at the door shifted, uncomfortable. She didn't move. I know, she said quietly. Rook blinked, thrown off balance by the calmness. She continued, I know where you buried them. For the first time, real uncertainty flickered across Rook's face. He recovered fast, laugh forced. Lies. She shrugged slightly as if the truth didn't require his belief. You keep a list, she said. You keep it in a tin box under your bed, because you trust metal more than men. Names you stole, names you sold, names you told yourself were mistakes. Rook's jaw clenched. His hand tightened around his glass. Who told you that? She looked at him with something like pity. You think you are one man, she said, but you are many men stitched together by other people's fear. Fear leaks. Fear talks. Rook's eyes narrowed. You have friends, he said. She didn't deny it. Rook set his glass down carefully, as if controlling his own hands might control the situation. He took a breath, then smiled again, slower, more dangerous. Fine, he said. Let's speak plainly. You want something. Everyone does. He circled her, like a man judging an animal. You want to be feared, he said. You want to be remembered. You want to believe you're not what you are. He stopped behind her. But you are here, he murmured. In my house. Her voice stayed steady. Yes, she said. In your house. Rook's smile sharpened. Then you'll learn, he whispered, that your mouth can't save you. She turned her head slightly, just enough to look back at him. My mouth isn't what saves me, she said. It's what kills the lie you live in. For a heartbeat, the air felt tight as cloth pulled too hard. Then Rook laughed suddenly, loud, harsh. Good, he said. Good. I like a spirited purchase. He nodded to the guard. Take her to the back room, he ordered. Lock it. And if she speaks again, you... She interrupted him softly. Your sister is not in Baton Rouge, she said. Rook stopped mid-sentence, as if his body had hit a wall. The guard froze too. Rook's eyes snapped to her. What did you say? She faced him fully now. Your sister, she repeated, the one you tell people is visiting family. She is not there. Rook's face went still, and Jules, miles away, could not see it. But if he had, he would have recognized the look. It was the look of a man whose secret wasn't just sin. It was fear. She's in the city, the woman continued, calm. She's been in the city for weeks. She's been meeting a man you would kill if you knew his name. And she thinks she is safe because you are too proud to imagine your own blood could betray you. Rook's throat worked. You don't know my sister. I know what she wrote, the woman said. Rook's hand went to his pocket instinctively, as if searching for a letter that wasn't there. She watched the movement and smiled slightly. You keep other people's papers, she said. So it seems fair I should keep yours. Rook stared at her, anger and panic wrestling behind his eyes. Then slowly he lowered his hand. The guard looked between them, unsure who held power now. Rook's voice came out quiet, controlled with effort. Take her, he told the guard, but the order lacked conviction now. Just take her. As the guard reached for her arm, she spoke one more time, almost gentle. Tell your sister, she said, that the man she trusts is the one who sold her friend. Rook's head snapped up. Stop! But the words were already in the room. The guard, shaken, led the woman away, down a corridor that smelled of tobacco and lemon polish, toward a back room with a lock that believed it was absolute. Rook stood alone in his parlor, staring at the door she disappeared through. He told himself he had bought her. He told himself he had control. But the truth was simpler and worse. He had brought a match into a house full of dry paper, and now he could smell smoke. By midnight, St. Claude Wharf was a different world. Daylight made the river look like commerce. Night made it look like a mouth. Lanterns swung from posts, casting weak circles of light that turned men into silhouettes. The smell of damp wood and fish and mud filled the air, thick as breath. Jules arrived with his coat collar up, his heart hammering. He told himself he was only watching. He told himself he could leave any time. He saw the man from earlier, the one who had leaned on the post, now standing near a stack of crates. The boy with the hoop was gone. The eyes were still there, just better hidden. A lantern with broken glass flickered near the wharf edge, its flame trembling as if nervous. Jules stepped toward it cautiously. A figure emerged from shadow. The woman who had shelled peas. She didn't speak. She simply nodded toward the river. Jules followed her gaze. A small boat drifted close, silent, oars muffled. 2 men in it moved with practiced precision, pulling alongside the wharf. Between them, crouched low, was someone bound. Jules's stomach clenched. The bound person's head was covered with a sack. The boat bumped softly against the wharf. Hands reached out, lifted the bound person up with careful speed. Jules stepped back, pulse roaring in his ears. The sack was pulled off. A young man's face appeared. Brown skin, bruised cheek, eyes wide with exhausted fury. Jules recognized him. He had seen him once before, months ago, running errands for a cafe near the river. A free boy, quick smile, always joking. Now the boy's lip was split. His wrists were raw. The woman from the step clenched her jaw. "They got him," she whispered. The man with the boot limped into view, eyes hard. "Quiet," he murmured. "We move." Jules's mouth open. "Captain Rook." The older man nodded. "Rook's men," he confirmed. "They were taking him downriver, to disappear him into a parish where papers don't matter." Jules' heart pounded. Why bring him here? Why not run? The woman's eyes flashed. "Because she told us," she whispered. Jules blinked. "She, do not bid, told you?" The older man's gaze sharpened. "Yes," he said, "from inside Rook's house." Jules's blood went cold. "How?" The older man didn't answer directly. He looked toward the dark river. "She's not trapped," he said quietly. "Not the way most are. She has ways." A sudden shout cut through the night. "Hey!" A lantern flare. Boot steps. The scrape of metal. Rook's men. Jules's spine went icy. Bodies moved fast. The freed boy was yanked toward the shadows. The older man with the limp shoved Jules hard behind a stack of crates. "Stay down!" he hissed. Jules crouched, breath shallow. 2 men hurried onto the wharf. White men with clubs, faces alert. One held a pistol low. "Where is he?" one barked. Silence answered. The men moved closer, lanterns swinging. Jules held his breath, trying to make himself smaller than his own skin. The lantern's light swept over crates, ropes, puddles. The older man with the limp held something in his hand. Small, dark. Jules saw a flash of steel, a knife. The older man's face was calm, too calm. Then he stepped out into the lantern's edge as if surrendering. "There," he said, pointing away from Jules. "He went that way." The men turned instinctively. And in that instant, the older man moved. Fast, precise. Not with wild violence, but with the quiet efficiency of someone who had decided long ago that survival required ugly acts. He struck one man hard enough to drop him. The other raised the pistol, but the woman from the step surged forward, grabbed his arm, wrenched it down. The pistol went off. The sound cracked through the night like a whip. Jules flinched, ears ringing. The bullet hit wood, splintering a crate. The older man slammed the second man into the post. The pistol clattered to the boards. In seconds, it was over. The 2 men lay groaning, alive, stunned. Jules stared, trembling. The older man grabbed the pistol, glanced around. "Move!" he snapped. They moved. Fast, coordinated, like a practiced dance. The freed boy was pushed into the boat again, still shaking but upright now. The boat slid away, swallowed by darkness. The woman from the step grabbed Jules's sleeve. "Go!" she hissed. Go back. Pretend you saw nothing. Jules' mouth opened. What about her? The woman. The older man's eyes hardened. She's still inside, he said. And now, Rook will know she's the leak. Jules' stomach dropped. Then we have to. The older man cut him off. We don't rush into a captain's house, he said grimly. That's how people become ghosts. Jules' chest tightened. Then she'll die. The older man's gaze turned sharp, almost cruel. Don't speak death like it's new, he said. Jules flinched. The older man exhaled, voice lower. She knew what she was doing, he said. She chose Rook. She forced his hand. Jules shook. Why would she do that? The older man looked out at the river as if reading an answer in its black surface. Because, he said, some cages only open from the inside. The next morning, Captain Silas Rook tore his house apart. Not with screaming, not with drunken rage. That was for men who needed witnesses. Rook was careful, controlled, quiet in the way that made servants' hands shake. He stood in his bedroom, the tin box from under his bed open on the mattress. It was empty. The list was gone. Names, payments, notes, proof. His breath came slow. His face was still, but his eyes had the look of a man watching a floor collapse one board at a time. He turned to his lieutenant, a man named Harlan with dead eyes. Find it, Rook said simply. Harlan swallowed. Yes, Captain. Rook's gaze flicked toward the closed door of the back room where she was locked. He walked to it and opened it himself. Inside, the room was bare except for a cot. The small window was too high to reach. The lock on the outside was thick. She sat on the cot, hands folded in her lap as if waiting for a visitor. Rook stepped inside and closed the door behind him, leaving Harlan outside. For the first time, Rook and the woman were alone without an audience. Rook stared at her. You did it, he said quietly. She didn't pretend not to understand. Yes, she replied. Rook's voice stayed low. Where is it? She tilted her head. Where is what? Rook's jaw tightened. The box. The papers. She looked at him steadily. You want your sins back, she said. Rook's hand clenched into a fist at his side. I want what is mine. She smiled faintly. That's what every buyer says. Rook stepped closer, stopping just short of her. You think you're clever, he murmured, but clever doesn't stop bleeding. Her face didn't change. Are you threatening me? She asked softly. Or are you trying to convince yourself you still can? Rook's nostrils flared. You think you can ruin me with paper. She leaned forward slightly, voice calm. Not ruin, she corrected. Expose. Rook's eyes narrowed. Expose to who? She shrugged. To the men who pretend they don't do business with you, she said. To the judges who shake your hand and call you necessary. To the wives who smile at you at church because they don't want their husbands targeted. Rook's mouth tightened. I have friends. She nodded. Yes, she said. And friends are the first to step away when the smell becomes too strong. Rook stared at her. What do you want? There it was. The question he had avoided, because asking it admitted she had leverage. She looked at him, eyes steady. I want you to buy someone else, she said. Rook blinked. Buy? She nodded. A girl, she said. She's 12. She's in Gerard's holding pen now. Her name is Lottie. You will buy her. You will sign the paper. You will bring her here. Rook's face hardened. You think I'll do favors because you stole from me? She met his gaze. You will, she said softly. Because if you don't, your sister's letters go to your enemies. Rook's eyes flickered. Pain, anger, fear. He hissed, You don't have her letters. She smiled faintly. Where do you think she hid them? She asked. In the piano bench? Under her mattress? No. She leaned in, voice barely above a breath. She hid them where she thought you would never look, she whispered. In your own tin box. Rook's face went white, then hard. He stepped back, as if the air between them had turned to poison. You're lying, he said. She didn't argue. Try me, she said. Rook stared at her, chest rising and falling. Then he turned abruptly and left the room, slamming the door. Outside, Harlan flinched. Rook's voice came out cold. "Get dressed," he snapped. "We go to Gerard." Harlan hesitated. "Captain, about the missing boy last night." Rook's gaze sliced toward him. "If you say his name," Rook said softly, "I'll make you smaller than paper." Harlan shut his mouth. Rook marched out of the house. Behind him in the locked room, the woman sat back down, hands folded again. She closed her eyes briefly, not in prayer, in calculation. At the auction house, Baptiste Giraud nearly choked when Captain Rook walked in. He forced a grin, wiping sweat from his brow. "Captain, a pleasure. If you've come to complain." Rook didn't smile. "I'm here to buy," he said. Giraud's eyes lit greedily. "Another?" he asked, eager. Rook's gaze was flat. "A girl, 12, named Lottie." Giraud blinked, thrown off. "A child? That, Captain. I have fine field hands, strong men." Rook leaned in slightly. "Bring her," he said. Giraud swallowed. He snapped his fingers at a guard. "Fetch her." While they waited, Rook's gaze swept the office. It landed on Jules. Jules's stomach dropped. Rook's eyes narrowed as if recognizing him from the rostrum, from the crowd, from somewhere else. "You," Rook said. Jules forced his voice steady. "Yes, Captain." Rook walked closer, boots quiet on the wood. "You write names," Rook said. "It wasn't a question." Jules nodded stiffly. Rook's voice lowered. "Write this one carefully," he said. Jules's pen trembled. The guard returned, pushing a small girl forward. She was thin, eyes too big, hair in tight braids. She clutched a scrap of cloth in her hands like a lifeline. Her gaze flicked up at the men, then down again quickly. Jules's chest tightened. Giraud beamed, eager. "Fine little thing. Young enough to train. Strong enough to work. Captain, she'll serve you well." Rook cut him off. "Price?" Giraud named a number. Rook didn't haggle. He threw coins on the desk. Jules wrote the bill of sale with numb fingers. As he wrote, he saw the girl's eyes flick to his hand, to the pen. Something desperate flashed there, as if ink itself looked like hope. When Jules finished, he handed the paper to Rook. Rook didn't look at it. He simply folded it and slipped it into his coat. Then, as he turned to leave with the girl, he paused. His eyes met Jules's. "You were at the wharf last night," Rook said softly. Jules's blood turned to ice. Giraud blinked. "Wharf? Captain? My clerk." Rook ignored him. Jules tried to speak, but his throat locked. Rook's smile was thin. "If you lie," he said gently, "I'll find out. And if you tell the truth, I'll still find out." Then he walked out, taking the girl with him. Jules stood frozen, pen still in hand, ink dripping onto the paper like a slow wound. Giraud stared after Rook, confused. "What in God's name?" he muttered. Jules didn't answer. He couldn't stop thinking about the girl's eyes. And he couldn't stop hearing the woman's voice from the rostrum. "My price is not money." That night, Jules couldn't stay away. He told himself he was going to warn her. He told himself he was going to save the girl. He told himself anything except the truth, that the story had grabbed him by the throat and he couldn't breathe without following it. He reached Rook Street after dark, keeping to shadows. The house stood quiet, shutters closed, balcony empty. Jules waited near a tree, heart pounding. He saw a back door open briefly. A servant slipped out, emptied a bucket, slipped back in. The street stayed silent. Jules's fingers tightened around the small knife he carried more for comfort than skill. He didn't know how long he waited before he heard it. A scream. Not loud, not long. A cut-off sound, muffled quickly. Jules's blood ran cold. He moved toward the house, stepped silent despite panic. He reached the side alley, pressed close to the wall and listened. Inside, voices. Rook's voice, low, furious. Another voice, Harlan. And then her voice, soft, calm. as if she were reading a letter aloud. Jules's breath hitched. He crept closer to a window, peered through a crack in the shutter. He saw the back room door open. He saw Rook standing inside, rigid. He saw the woman seated on the cot, and beside her, the girl, Lottie, huddled, eyes wide, arms wrapped around herself. Rook pointed at the woman, voice like ice. "Enough games," he said. "Where are my papers?" The woman looked at him steadily. "You bought a child for me," she said. Rook's jaw clenched. "Yes, now—" She held up a hand gently. "You signed her," she said, "in your name." Rook's eyes narrowed. "So?" She looked at the girl. "This," she said softly, "is your mistake." Rook's face hardened. "What are you talking about?" She turned her gaze back to him. "You can buy a child," she said. "You can sign paper. You can lock doors." Her voice stayed calm. "But you cannot make paper forget your name." Rook's eyes flickered. She continued, "You wanted to prove you fear nothing. So you put your name on her." Rook's breath tightened. "You think I care if my name is on one bill of sale?" She nodded slowly. "No," she said. "You care if your name is on a bill of sale that goes to a judge. You care if your name is on a bill of sale attached to a case." Rook stared. "Case?" The woman smiled faintly. "You have enemies," she said. "Not abolitionists with pamphlets. Men with pens. Men with grudges. Men who want your place." Rook's voice came out sharp. "What did you do?" She leaned forward slightly, eyes steady. "I sent your name," she said softly, "to someone who collects names." Rook's face went still. "Who?" The woman didn't answer directly. Instead, she said, "When the marshal comes, you will say you didn't know. You will say you trusted Girard. You will say it was a mistake." She paused. "And the judge will ask," she continued, "why a man like you, who claims to be righteous, was buying children." Rook's hand shook slightly. "You're bluffing," he hissed. She looked at him with something like pity. "You think everything is bluff," she said, "because you have lived on other people's fear. You don't recognize when fear becomes a ledger." Rook's jaw worked. He looked suddenly, for the first time, less like a hunter and more like a man cornered. He turned abruptly, storming out of the room. Harlan followed, glancing back with hatred in his eyes. The door slammed. In the room, the girl began to tremble. Her breath came fast. The woman turned to her, voice gentle now. "Lottie," she said softly, "look at me." The girl's eyes lifted reluctantly. The woman held her gaze. "You are not alone," she said. Lottie's lip quivered. "They said," she whispered, voice barely audible, "they said you make men die." The woman's expression softened, a shadow crossing it. "No," she said quietly. "Men die because they think they are gods." She reached out slowly, not touching the girl yet, letting the girl decide. "We are going to leave," she murmured. "But you must be quiet. You must listen." Lottie nodded faintly, tears in her eyes. Jules's throat tightened painfully. He backed away from the window, mind spinning. The woman wasn't just trying to be unsellable. She was weaponizing paper, names, law, shame. And she had just turned Captain Rook's pride into a trap. Jules staggered back into the alley, breathing hard. He didn't see the shadow behind him until it moved. A hand clamped over his mouth. A voice hissed in his ear. "You shouldn't be here." Jules' heart slammed. He twisted, elbowing back, but the grip held. Harlan's face appeared in the dim light, eyes flat, mouth tight. "You like watching," Harlan whispered. "You like being curious." Jules tried to speak, but Harlan's hand silenced him. Harlan leaned closer. "Captain says you were at the wharf," he murmured. "Captain says you have a habit of being near trouble." Jules's eyes widened, panic rising. Harlan's gaze flicked toward the house. "You know what she is," he whispered. "A poison that talks." Jules shook his head violently. Harlan's mouth twisted. "We're going to fix the leak," he said. He dragged Jules deeper into the alley, away from the street. Jules's mind raced. He tried to kick, to twist free, but Harlan was stronger, practiced. Harlan shoved Jules against the brick wall, breath hot with anger. "You tell me what you heard," Harlan hissed. "You tell me who she's sending to." Jules's mouth was dry. He couldn't answer without dying. Harlan's eyes narrowed. He raised his fist. A soft voice cut through the dark. "Harlan." Harlan froze. Jules's eyes widened. The woman stood at the end of the alley, not running, not panting, as if she had simply stepped out for air. Behind her, Lottie hovered in the shadow of the door, trembling. Harlan's hand tightened on Jules's collar. "Go back inside," he snapped at the woman. "This ain't your—" "It is," she interrupted softly. Harlan's eyes flashed. "You think you own the night now?" She tilted her head. "No," she said. "I think you forgot how many people the night belongs to." Harlan sneered. "You're not frightening me." She nodded slowly. "Good," she said. "Then you can listen without shaking." Harlan's jaw clenched. "What do you want?" She took a step forward. "I want you to let him go," she said, nodding toward Jules. Harlan laughed. "Why? So he can run to the marshal too?" The woman's gaze stayed steady. "You don't understand," she said softly. "He isn't the danger." Harlan tightened his grip. "Then you are." She didn't deny it. She took another step closer. "You want to protect your captain," she said. "You want to be loyal." Harlan's eyes narrowed. "I am loyal." She nodded. "Then prove it," she said. Harlan blinked. "How?" She looked toward the street where distant lantern light flickered. "By leaving," she said simply. Harlan's face twisted. "You think I'll just walk away?" She leaned forward slightly, voice calm. "If you stay," she said, "you will die for a man who will not remember your name." The words hung in the air like cold mist. Harlan's mouth opened, then closed. Jules felt Harlan's grip falter slightly. The woman's voice softened, almost gentle. "I know what you did for him," she murmured. "I know what you buried for him. I know what you told yourself was necessary." Harlan's eyes widened. Just a flicker of fear. Jules felt it too. Harlan swallowed. "You don't know anything." The woman smiled faintly. "You have a mother in Plaquemines," she said softly. "You send her money. You tell her you work in shipping." Harlan's breath caught. The woman continued, calm. "You don't want her to know you became a dog for a man who calls you useful and means disposable." Harlan's face went pale. Jules stared, mind reeling. She wasn't guessing. She was precise. Harlan's grip loosened. The woman's gaze didn't waver. "Let him go," she said again, softly like a lullaby. Harlan's jaw trembled. His eyes darted toward the house, toward the door, toward the shadows inside where Rook might hear. Then Harlan shoved Jules away hard. Jules stumbled, gasping. Harlan pointed a shaking finger at Jules. "If I see you again," he hissed, trying to regain menace, "I'll—" The woman's voice cut through, quiet. "You'll go," she said. Harlan's eyes flicked to her, hatred and fear tangled. Then he turned and vanished into the night, boots muffled. Jules leaned against the wall, chest heaving. The woman stepped closer. In the dim light, her face looked older, wearier around the eyes. "You're reckless," she said quietly to Jules. Jules choked out a laugh. "You dragged me into this." She didn't deny it. She glanced back toward Lottie. "We're leaving," she said softly. Jules' heart slammed. "Now?" She nodded. "How?" Jules whispered. Rook is busy," she said, voice flat. "With what?" Jules asked. She looked toward the street again, eyes narrowed. "With realizing his own name is a rope," she said. Then she turned to Lottie and held out her hand. Lottie hesitated, then reached out and took it. The woman looked at Jules. "Are you coming?" she asked. "Or are you staying to pretend you're clean?" Jules's throat tightened. He thought of his father's warnings. He thought of Giraud's ledger. He thought of Rook's eyes. He thought of the girl's trembling hands. Jules pushed himself off the wall. "I'm coming," he whispered. The woman nodded once as if she had expected no less and no more. They moved through back alleys, slipping between sleeping houses and open courtyards, the city's night noises masking their footsteps. The woman seemed to know every turn, every shadow. Jules realized with a cold jolt that she had navigated this city like a map long before she ever stepped onto the rostrum. As they crossed a narrow street, a carriage rattled by, wheels loud. Jules flinched, pulling Lottie closer instinctively. The woman glanced at him, expression unreadable. "You protect," she murmured. "That's new for you." Jules swallowed. "I'm trying." She didn't smile. "Trying is just another word," she said softly. "What matters is what you do when the price arrives." They reached a small courtyard behind a closed shop. A door opened quietly. The man with the limp bootman stood there, eyes sharp. "You're late," he whispered. The woman's face tightened. "Rook moved faster than I expected," she said. The man glanced at Jules and Lottie, nodded. "Inside," he murmured. They entered a cramped room where a lantern burned low. A table was covered in papers. Jules's eyes widened as he saw them. Bills of sale, letters, lists, signatures, names. So many names. The woman moved to the table quickly, pulling a small bundle from under her dress. She set it down. Jules stared. "You had that on you?" She nodded. "Not all," she said. "Enough." The man with the limp leaned over the papers, eyes scanning. "You got his list," he murmured, impressed despite himself. She nodded once. "And his sister's letters," she added. The man exhaled. "That'll make him bleed." Jules's skin prickled. "What are you going to do with it?" The woman looked at him. "Do you know what terrifies buyers?" she asked quietly. Jules swallowed. "Rumors." She shook her head. "Rumors are wind," she said. "Men laugh at wind. Men drink with wind." She tapped the papers. "Proof," she said softly. "Proof is a hand on the throat." Lottie stared at the table, eyes wide. The woman's voice softened as she looked at the girl. "This is how we make them let go," she murmured. Jules' heart pounded. "You can't just—" "You think there is a polite way," the woman interrupted gently, "to ask a man to stop buying people?" Jules flinched. The man with the limp glanced toward the window. "We don't have much time," he said. "Rook will hunt tonight." The woman nodded, then turned to Jules. "You asked who I am," she said quietly. Jules' throat tightened. "Yes." She reached into her bundle and pulled out a folded paper. Older, creased, stained with sweat. She laid it on the table. Jules leaned forward. At the top, in elegant handwriting, were the words, "Act of Manumission." His breath caught. The document bore a signature, fancy, practiced, and a seal. The woman's voice was calm, almost flat. "My name," she said, "is Celeste Delacroix." Jules blinked, stunned. "Delacroix?" The man with the limp exhaled sharply. "You had it the whole time," he murmured. Celeste nodded. "Yes." Jules' mind spun. "Then you're free." Celeste's eyes hardened. "On paper," she said softly. "Paper is only as strong as the hands that hold it." Jules stared at the seal. "Who signed it?" Celeste's gaze went distant. "A man who wanted to ease his conscience," she said. "A man who thought ink could absolve him." Jules's voice came out hoarse. "Why didn't you use it? Why didn't you show it at the auction? You could have—" Celeste's expression sharpened. "And they would have taken it," she said. "They would have laughed, torn it, burned it. They would have said it was forged. They would have called me a liar and sold me anyway." She leaned forward, eyes intense. "So, I did something else," she said softly. Jules swallowed. "You became—" "Do not bid!" Celeste nodded once. "I made myself a problem," she said, "because problems get noticed, and when men notice, they reveal themselves." The man with the limp tapped the manumission paper. "Where did you get this?" he asked quietly. Celeste's jaw tightened. "A judge," she said. "A judge who fathered me and refused to claim me." Jules's stomach twisted. "You're—" Celeste's eyes flashed. "Yes," she said softly. "His blood. His shame." Silence filled the room. Jules' mind raced. He thought of the men on the rostrum, the way their faces had shifted. Celeste had been naming secrets not because she was magic, because she had grown up near secrets, because she had been raised close enough to the world of white respectability to understand exactly where it cracked. The man with the limp exhaled. "We can use this," he said. Celeste nodded. "Tonight," she said, "we send copies to the marshal, to the judge's rival, to the newspaper man who pretends he's neutral. We scatter his list like ash." Jules' heart hammered. "And what then?" Celeste looked at Lottie. "Then," she said softly, "we run before the wind becomes fire." The room moved into action. Hands copying, folding, sealing. The woman from the step appeared carrying wax. Another man slipped in with a satchel. Jules stood frozen, watching. Celeste stepped close to him. "You're shaking," she observed quietly. Jules swallowed. "Rook will kill you," he whispered. Celeste's eyes didn't flinch. "Rook will try," she said, "because he cannot live with being seen." Jules's throat tightened. "Why take the risk? You're free on paper. You could leave alone." Celeste looked at him for a long moment. Then she said softly, "I was sold once after that paper was signed." Jules's chest tightened. Celeste continued, voice steady. "Freedom on paper did not stop the chain," she said, "so I learned the chain's language." She glanced toward Lottie again. "And I learned," she said, "that leaving alone is just another kind of lie." Jules swallowed hard. "So the buyers were terrified because—" Celeste's gaze sharpened. "Because," she said softly, "I could make their world hear what they whisper." She leaned in slightly. "And because," she added, "once a buyer fears being seen, he becomes careless, and carelessness makes doors open." Outside, the city's night noises shifted. More footsteps, distant shouts, lantern light moving like searching eyes. The man with the limp looked up sharply. "They're coming," he warned. Celeste's face went calm again, the calm of someone who has already chosen. She handed Jules a sealed envelope. "Take this," she said. "Deliver it to the newspaper office on Chartres. Drop it in the box. Don't wait." Jules stared. "What about you?" Celeste's eyes were steady. "I'll deliver the rest," she said. Jules's throat tightened. "You can't—" Celeste cut him off gently. "This is the price," she said softly. "Not money, motion." She squeezed his wrist once, brief, firm. "Go," she said. Jules ran. He moved through alleys and streets, dodging lantern beams, heart pounding like a drum. Behind him, he heard shouting grow louder. He didn't look back. He reached the newspaper office and shoved the envelope into the box with trembling hands. Then he turned, breath ragged, and ran back toward the Marigny courtyard. Smoke was already in the air, not thick yet, but present. The smell of burning paper, of wax, of wood. Jules's stomach dropped. He rounded a corner and saw lanterns clustering like fireflies around the courtyard. Men's voices shouted orders. "Rook's men!" Jules crouched behind a fence, peering through. The shop door had been forced open. Inside, shadows moved violently. Jules's heart hammered. Then, through the chaos, he saw her. Celeste. Not bound. Not dragged. Moving fast, purposeful, hair loose now, face streaked with soot. She held Lottie's hand. Behind them, the man with the limp staggered out, clutching his side, teeth clenched. Another woman followed, carrying a satchel. Rook's men surged forward. A lantern swung. Someone shouted, "There!" Jules's breath caught. Celeste glanced toward the street and saw Jules. For a heartbeat, her eyes locked on his. And in that instant, Jules understood something that struck him like lightning. She had known this might happen. She had planned for loss. She had planned for fire. Because fire burned paper, yes. But fire also created confusion. And confusion was the only shelter the hunted ever truly had. Celeste pulled Lottie toward the alley. The men chased. Jules's mind snapped into action. He grabbed a loose board from the fence and hurled it into the street, crashing it against a lantern post. The sudden noise drew attention. Two men turned instinctively toward Jules's hiding spot. Jules's blood went cold. He ran. He sprinted down an alley, boots slipping on damp stones, lungs burning. He heard pursuit behind him, shouts, footfalls. He turned a corner sharply and collided with someone. Hands grabbed him, strong, quick. It was the woman from the step. eyes fierce. She yanked him into a doorway. "Quiet," she hissed. Jules pressed against the wall, panting. The footsteps thundered past, close enough Jules felt vibration in the ground. When they faded, Jules exhaled shakily. "Where is she?" he whispered. The woman's eyes flicked toward the street. "Gone," she whispered back. "Maybe." Jules' heart dropped. "Maybe?" The woman's jaw tightened. "This is not a story with guarantees," she snapped softly. A moment later, the man with the limp appeared, limping harder, face pale but alive. Blood stained his shirt. He leaned on the doorframe, breathing hard. "She got the girl out," he rasped. Jules's chest tightened. "Celeste?" The man's eyes hardened. "She went another way," he said. "To draw them." Jules's stomach twisted. "That means—" The man cut him off. "She's smarter than them," he said. "She's been smarter than them." Jules swallowed. "But Rook—" The man's gaze sharpened. "Rook is not the only danger," he said. Jules blinked. "What do you mean?" The man exhaled, voice rough. "When you threaten powerful men," he said, "the powerful men don't always strike openly. Sometimes they send the law." Jules's skin went cold. "The marshal," he whispered. The man nodded grimly. "And judges," he said. "And priests who want quiet. And wives who want their husbands' names clean." Jules' throat tightened. "Then she can't win." The man with the limp looked at him sharply. "Winning isn't always surviving," he said. "Sometimes winning is leaving a mark that doesn't wash off." Jules's eyes burned. "She can't just disappear." The man's expression softened slightly, just a crack. "She's been disappearing her whole life," he said quietly. "The difference now is she chose it." The next day, New Orleans woke to whispers. A notice appeared on the courthouse steps. A copy of Captain Rook's list, inked cleanly, names and dates and payments written plain enough for even the most polite man to understand. Another copy found its way into a rival judge's hands. Another went to a priest who had smiled beside Rook at a christening. And in the newspaper office, a young printer found an envelope in the drop box and, with shaking fingers, opened it. He read the contents. His face went pale. And despite the risks, despite the bribes that would surely come, he printed a cautious article. Careful with language, but sharp enough to cut. Men who had once laughed at rumors now tightened their collars. Wives who had once smiled politely now asked questions in private. And Captain Silas Rook, who had built his life on the belief that fear belonged to other people, found fear in his own bed. He didn't sleep. He paced. He burned papers in his fireplace until the room smelled like ash. He sent Harlan to bribe the marshal. He sent another man to threaten the printer. He sent a third to buy Girard's silence. But silence was no longer enough. Because the city had a taste now. The taste of a secret exposed. And it wanted more. 3 nights after the fire, Captain Rook was arrested. Not in chains like the ones he had used. The law didn't like to stain itself. He was arrested politely, firmly, with papers. He smiled coldly as the marshal read the charges. Mistakes, he called them. Misunderstandings. Forgery. Envy. But when he was led out of his house, he saw people watching from windows. Not cheering. Not crying. Just watching. Watching the hunter become a man being watched. And something in Rook's face cracked. Because he understood what Celeste had always known. A man can survive hatred. A man can survive rumor. But being seen, truly seen, was a different kind of death. Baptiste Giraud tried to recover. He told himself the scandal would fade. He told himself he could sell again if he kept his head down. But men began to avoid his auctions. Not because they were suddenly moral. Because they were suddenly nervous. If the wrong name was written, if the wrong paper leaked, if the wrong woman spoke, they could be next. Giraud drank more. He cursed Celeste's name like it was a demon's. He tore up catalogs. He burned old ledgers. but fear stuck to him. And on a humid morning, Jules arrived at the auction house and found Giraud sitting alone at his desk, staring at the empty rostrum through the window. Giraud looked up slowly, eyes bloodshot. "She ruined me," he whispered. Jules didn't answer. Giraud's voice cracked. "One woman," he said, almost incredulous. "One mouth." Jules felt something hard in his chest. "It wasn't her mouth," Jules said quietly. Giraud blinked. "What?" Jules looked at the desk, at the ink stains, at the ledger pages, at the tools of respectable cruelty. "It was your paper," Jules said softly, "and your names." Giraud's face twisted. "You speak like her now," he spat. Jules didn't deny it. He turned and walked out. He didn't return. Weeks passed. Rook's case moved slowly. Law liked to delay when its friends were threatened. Some charges were softened. Some witnesses disappeared. Some papers went missing. But the stain remained. And in the whispers, the woman's legend grew. They said she was a witch. They said she could see through walls. They said buyers who dared bid on her lost their fortunes, their wives, their sanity. They said she smiled at men, and they woke up terrified without knowing why. They said her eyes could name your sins before you had spoken them aloud. But in back rooms and courtyards, among people who lived close enough to truth to recognize it, a different story traveled. They said she wasn't magic. They said she was a woman who had learned that in a world built on paper, paper could be a weapon. They said she had turned shame into a blade and used it without flinching. They said she had saved a child named Lottie and disappeared into the river parishes with her like a ghost with purpose. They said she had left behind copies of her manumission paper in 3 different hands so it could not be burned in one fire. They said she had been the judge's blood, but she chose to be her own name. And in the months that followed, in quiet corners of Louisiana, small things began to shift. A man hesitated before buying. A woman asked where a girl had gone. A clerk hid a paper instead of destroying it. A free boy walked with his head higher, because someone had risked everything to pull him from a boat. In the spring of 1860, Jules received a letter with no return address. It was delivered by a boy who didn't speak. The paper was folded tight, sealed with a smear of wax pressed by a coin. Jules' hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a single page, no greeting, no signature, just a few lines, written in clean, steady handwriting. "You asked who I am. I am the reason a buyer checks his own name. I am the reason a ledger shakes. Tell the next man who holds a pen that ink can be a chain or a key. And tell him this: the ones who terrify the market are not monsters. They are witnesses." Jules stared at the words until his eyes blurred. Then at the bottom, one more line, small, almost an afterthought. "Lottie laughs now." Jules exhaled shakily, something breaking open in his chest. He folded the letter and tucked it into his pocket like a talisman. He walked out into the humid Louisiana air and looked at the river beyond the city, the wide brown vein that carried bodies and commerce and secrets. He imagined Celeste somewhere beyond it, moving through cane fields and back roads, changing names like clothes, carrying truth like a knife she didn't show unless necessary. And he finally understood why every buyer in Louisiana had been terrified. It wasn't because she could curse them. It wasn't because she could kill them. It was because she could do something far worse. To a man who believed himself untouchable, she could make him visible. And once a man like that is seen, once his name is written where it shouldn't be, once his private rot is dragged into daylight, he can never buy comfort again. He can only buy silence. And silence, after her, was no longer for sale.